Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. Hope that you will check out the wonderful resources available there and on their social media pages, and that you'll follow us on our social media page, and that you'll find Moonshine Jesus Show wherever you get your podcast. I am here today, as always, with my good buddy Mark Sandlin. How are you doing today, Mark?
I am doing really well, sir. I'm looking forward to the show. This is like my favorite part of the week. I love getting together, geeking out, doing a little theopolitical talk around shows that I would be watching anyway. So this is the best.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is, right? It's so much fun that even on our day off, a holiday, we are still doing Moonshine Jesus Show.
Of course we are.
Of course we are, because it's so much fun. Today we are talking about 3,000 Years of Longing. It is a movie from 2022, so you have had a chance to see it. But just in case you haven't watched it yet, we should let you know that there will be spoilers if you stay tuned. That is our favorite thing to do, spoil the show for you.
You're welcome.
What are you drinking today?
Well, I just went online and looked up some genie-related drinks. I found one simply called Genie, and it's very simple. It's just cherry vodka and blue curacao, and I've decorated it with some purple sprinkles to give it that little extra magical feel. What did you go with, sir?
I love yours because it's purple and blue with two of the colors that the gin kind of has.
Absolutely.
And so the other color that was a part of his smoke emanation was red. And so I also went online and looked up, this time, a gin.
Gin.
DG or DJINN, right? And so, of course, it's made with gin.
Yeah, imagine that.
GIN, vermouth, lemon juice, and sparkling grapefruit water.
Lovely.
So the gin.
Cheers
to you, Mark.
Yeah.
How is it?
It tastes like cough syrup. But you know what? It's the first time I've made a drink for the show that I really am not a big fan of.
I had to ask you right away because I could see it in your face.
I'm a trooper. I will power through this. I will still consume this drink for the sake of the show, because the show matters. The show must go on.
It must go on. And I'm not a big gin drinker, but I thought the play on words was too good.
Beautiful play on words. Absolutely.
So I'll suffer through mine too. Hey, okay, let's try to sip a few more sips on these drinks as we move into our geeking out segment. We'll be right back after the drop.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Geek Out segment where we geek out about the show we're talking about. But just to catch those up who maybe haven't seen or heard about 3,000 Years of Longing, it is a modern, grown-up fairy tale that looks at life, love, and loss. And in it, Dr. Alethea Benny meets a djinn who offers her 3 wishes in exchange for his freedom while she's in Istanbul for a narratological conference. And yes, that's an actual job and word. You can look it up. A narratological conference. And as an expert in mythology and story, she is aware of all the cautionary tales of wishes gone awry. The djinn makes his case by sharing with her his sad yet amazing tales from his life as a djinn. And however, rather than rush into the 3 wishes and set him free, they both realize that they need each other in order to fill gaping holes in their lives. And in the end, though, she surprises both of them with her final wish. So I'm curious. You and I just kind of picked this because we couldn't find much else that was out there. It seemed to fit into the categories of what we did. It had Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba, both great actors. So we knew that there was going to be some value in this. The director is the same director from Mad Max, the most recent one. I can't remember it's not Thunderdome.
Oh, Fury Road.
Fury Road.
Yeah. Fury Road. Yeah.
Same director. So we had pretty good feeling that it could be decent. So I'm curious, though, what was your take on it? How did you feel about it after watching it?
I thought, especially the opening lines were gold for people who are interested in any kind of mythology, and certainly for folks like us who build our profession around thinking through kind of ancient mythology and how we make meaning out of ancient stories. I thought that thinking through that was very advantageous. I like that. Yeah. As far as the movie as a whole, I thought, were I not interested in those things, I'm not sure the movie would have been my cup of tea.
Yeah. What parts of it that were not where you needed them to be?
Well, I enjoyed hearing some. I enjoyed hearing the Jin's journey to the modern age and some of his experiences. It didn't feel like much of a movie, though. It didn't provide me the entertainment value I think that I wanted from it, Mark. You know, it felt more like an episode of a TV show than it did a movie. What I'm saying is, I think this got a 6-minute standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival. I'm not sure I would have been standing and offering the ovation. It's good. I liked it for what it was, but I can see why it didn't make a whole lot of money. I'm not sure that it has a mass appeal.
I actually think this is a show that's main appeal and main audience are really high-end narrative consumers, people who really get into. I mean, this is a show that is ultimately talking about itself as it does its whole thing. As it there's that kind of complex storytelling going on, that it's talking about itself as it's telling the story that it's telling. I did find it weird that basically the entire movie, outside of flashbacks, happens in a hotel room.
Right.
I mean, there's really no, I think that's part of the problem. I had a problem with the pacing. It just felt, there were times where it felt plotting, man. It just felt like, come on, get on with this. Now, we would shift into the stories of the Jin telling, his 3 sad stories of how he fell in love and was ultimately captured because of it, or trapped again because of it. And those, I felt like, had pretty good pacing within those small windows. And for me, they did feel like kind of each of those felt like their own television episodes. Like each of his stories felt a lot like 3 different television episodes. But there was a lot of, I thought, complexity going on in how the story was being told. But you have to really be interested in the construction of narrative, the construction of storytelling, to give a crap about what's going on, or to even notice that some stuff is going on that really makes this a somewhat, and I mean somewhat, clever movie. I don't know. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair assessment, because I would find myself kind of into the stories that he was talking, his 3 sad tales, as you say, and find myself as they go back to the hotel room thinking, oh yeah, we're still here. We're still thinking. But yeah, I mean, I think as we're talking about, making sense of our lives through myth, as we're hearing a myth to kind of make a commentary on love and life, I think is a smart play. So at the very beginning, we get I think the opening line, "My story is true, but you're more likely to believe it as a fairy tale."
Absolutely.
And she tells this. And so it sets the whole movie up in that way as kind of a fairy tale to make the commentary on love and needing other people. And so I did like that piece of it, and I found that valuable.
There were great lines in it. And if we have time in the segment, I'm going to
Yep.
go back to a couple of them that won't, I don't think, spoil our next segment.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a big question for you, because
Okay.
this really, I found it perplexing until I thought more about it. I found it very perplexing. Why did Alethea fall in love with the djinn so quickly? Like, she falls in love with him within a day of meeting him.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just curious, what was behind that? What do you think, both in the bigger picture, but also just in the narrative of the story, how are they justifying her falling in love with him that quickly?
I found it kind of frustrating because in the hour and 15 minutes leading up to this, she had a deep distrust of the djinn. And even through hearing the story, said, I'm not going to make any wishes. I know that you're a trickster, and I'm not interested in participating in this. I know how this always works out.
Right.
And I did think it was clever that we had seen through the stories kind of when there's a realization of love, kind of this big gulp, and you can see Alethea taking the big gulp, as she kind of falls in love. I think we're meant to say that through his stories of being isolated and finding love and realizing that he needed another person, that she is thinking about her own isolation, even though she feels herself being happy and feeling drawn to someone else. I don't know. I'm not sure I bought it.
No, I kind of agree with what you were just going towards. As a matter of fact, that's what ultimately saved it for me and made me start to like the movie even a little bit better, because I do think there's some very clever writing going on here. We have 3 stories from the djinn. In the first one, the djinn talks about Sheba and how he was really in love with Sheba, but how King Solomon comes along and steals Sheba away. And in that, Alethea has to see her relationship with Jack and Emmeline Porter coming and stealing away Jack. And then the second story, you have King Murray, who is spends most of the story being distracted by storytelling. And the djinn ends up in that part feeling very lonely, ignored in the midst of all of this. And those are things that Alethea very heavily identifies with. So you've got her re-seeing herself in his story again. And then in the third story, story of the djinn longing for happiness, either with Zephyr or in the djinn realm somehow, which is also what Alethea is ultimately longing for, is some kind of happiness. And in that story, Zephyr feels like a prisoner. She feels like a prisoner both in her marriage and ultimately in her relationship with the djinn. And of course, Alethea was kind of a prisoner of her own past and her lack of emotions, and only being able to find those in stories. So to me, I realized, okay, I think I get what you're telling me now. I wasn't sure whether the djinn was just like magically aware and made her connect with him by making her identify, or if it was a real connection. But I kind of see how that happened. And also she tells us early on that she finds emotion and love in the stories that she reads. And the djinn is this masterful storyteller. So it pulls out that emotion and love, which no one else seems to have been able to do in her life. So to a small degree, I kind of get, like, I think what was going on and why they tried to justify. I mean, am I stretching it too much?
That's a good point. And one line that is coming back to me is, as she's falling in love with the djinn, she says she wants to be a part of the stories. She wants him to tell her story. And so in her being a narratologist and finding meaning in the story, being a part of one of those stories, I suppose makes some sense. I think, though, it also does some disservice to her character, because she's, by her own admission, quite content with who she is, and it does make it seem like you have to have. You don't think she is? I mean, she has a full life, an academic career. I think she's honestly is it saying that you have to have a romantic interest to find meaning in life? I don't
know. I don't know that it's saying that you have to. I think that it's saying that she's fooled herself into believing that that's a life that's satisfactory for her. and that there is something. I mean, it's right there in the title, because it's not just the Jin's longing, it's also her longing. I think she has been longing to find that emotional connection somehow outside of stories. So I'm going to read. I want to get to two different quotes that I want to get your take on, because one of the things that was really good about this, the writing, I think, really is great writing. I don't know that it's great writing for a movie, but it was great writing. There was a lot of stuff going on. There were lots of mirroring going on, but there was also just some beautiful lines, and I want to get response on two of them. The first one is, she says, love is not something we come to by reason. It's more of a vapor, a dream, perhaps to lure us into enchantment, lure us into the enchantment of our own stories. If that's so, how are we to know if it's ever real, she says? Is it truth, or is it simply a madness? What do you think about this statement? Is there any real truth in that love is not something we can come to by reason, but it's more of a vapor or a dream, and ultimately, how do we ever know if it's real?
I think that so I think it's interesting that in ancient Greek they differentiated between types of love, and in English we don't. And I think it depends on the type of love you're talking about. I think if you're talking about romantic love, in a lot of ways that does often defy reason. Right. And there's truth to that there's something, even sometimes when it's not reasonable, you find yourself in some kind of in love. And so I think that is something that can be a little more hard to define, can be a little more vaporous, and in some respects can also tie into like infatuation. I think if you're talking about love, like agape love, like I was talking about eros love, right? If you're talking about like agape love, like love of neighbor and stuff, I think that can be more rational, and sometimes you have to ration your way into loving somebody because
their actions don't. Right, their actions don't necessarily lend to it real easily. Yeah.
Right, they really don't. And so you have to say, this is for the betterment of myself. This is for the betterment of society. That I am compassionate towards them. I completely. That's agree. Where I land. What
I completely agree. I do think that they're talking about eros love here.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt, just because of how the story plays out, that's what they're doing. Right. But I completely agree with you. It is a bit of a naive statement if you're not being specific about that. It is that eros kind of love, because there are so many other ways of understanding love, and most of those other ways you can reason yourself into them. There's always some emotion that's part of it. But I did like that description, and I really liked thinking of it as a vapor or a dream, and that because of how it comes about, there's no way to actually 100% know if it's ever real, or if it's ever the truth, or if it's just this kind of human madness that we kind of are attracted to and can't let go of. So anyway, there's other quotes that I was going to cover, but we've gone on and on already about some really interesting stuff in this movie, and I've enjoyed the conversation so far. But I've been there were quotes that I didn't use because I was hoping that you'll end up using. We'll see, because like I said, this is some great, clever writing. I think there's some good writing going on. So we're going to take a quick drop, have another sip of my cough medicine, and then we will come back on the other side with our Theopolitico segment.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are moving into our Theopolitico segment as we talk about 3,000 years of longing. And you set this up perfectly, Mark, because what I have taught for this segment is a series of quotes. Your reaction to.
Can I say something that I meant to say at the very end of that last segment?
Yes.
There was also a quote that I felt like summed the movie within the movie. And that quote was, "Despite all the whiz bang, we remain bewildered." For me, that's kind of the perfect description of the movie.
Mhm.
So anyway, I am very interested to see what quotes you picked up.
Okay, I want to start out with one that I've already lifted up. So my story is true. You're more likely to believe it if I tell it as a fairy tale. I want to start with that one, and I want to build from there. So,
Okay.
does that relate to the Bible in any way? And if so, how does that relate to the biblical text?
100%. I mean, good storytelling allows us to hear and to process very difficult truths in a way that reality pulls up our defenses and makes us shut it down a little bit. So it 100% relates to it. That's the reason Jesus mostly taught in parables rather than just stating truths, taught in parables, because it gives you more to hold on to. You push it out from me into this other space. It's easier to look at it from a distance and analyze it and begin to try to understand who am I, or what's going on in the story, and does it mean anything to me ultimately? So I think it's an incredible technique. It's one of the reasons that my first undergraduate degree was in English, because I was so fascinated with the way that telling stories and storytelling really allows us to talk about very difficult subjects. So yeah, I definitely think so. And we see it throughout the Bible, even in the Old Testament. You know, a lot of people want to take that most of it literally, but the fact is the priest and everyone who put those stories together understood the value of storytelling. The Jewish rabbi who assembled a lot of that understood this does not have to be factual. It just needs to tell a truth, which is what most of the stories do. Some of them start with basics that are true, like there was a king named David, but he was very small in a very small area, and they build off of that and create these stories that tell us larger truths. And I think there's great value in that. I mean, what was your take?
Yeah, 100%. I think it would do Christians good in the 21st century to recognize that ancient people looked around and tried to explain why the world was the way it was. And so they created stories and myths to help people understand that. And they understood that was the purpose of it. It wasn't ever meant to be taken literally. You mentioned parables as well. And I think one of the powers of parable is that you can recognize the truth in the parable without having to ask whether it actually happened or not. No one ever asks if there actually was a good Samaritan who came along, because you understand the power of the story. And so if we would view the biblical text in that whole way, like a parable, it would transform the way we saw the Bible, and it wouldn't be an idol for us anymore. And boy, wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be fantastic? And I can already tell by the way that you're talking and the way that this question is going, I think I know what your next quote is, but I can't wait to see if I've got it.
Let's see. So the next quote, and this is, well, it's kind of in chronological order of where they came in the show.
Okay,
so
all right. I might be off.
It's everything was a mystery. What else could we do but resort to stories? So this is at the conference where they're giving a lecture, and they say everything was a mystery in the ancient world. What else could we do but resort to stories? Is that so? Do you think that that's the reason that that ancient people have stories, is to solve mysteries, or why do you think we have these kind of mythological stories in general?
I think that there's multiple reasons that we have them. One of the key reasons is exactly that there are things that we now understand as science that weren't in the realm of understanding in those particular ages. And there was a need to understand what's going on. You know, why does the sun rise and set? What's going on? And so you create these stories around it to give some kind of too much mystery in life makes us feel unsettled. And that is very difficult. It can create a very anxious life. And so there's great reason for having these mythical stories, because when they were told, they weren't mythical. They were what they really tried to try to make sense out of reality and what was going on, and gave them some sense of calmness and understanding and control of what's going on around them. Because let's face it, life is not something we have any real control over. We like to think we do. We like to try to believe that we have some control. So it's great to have these stories that reinforce our sense of control, because if we were 100% honest about how random life is, I think it would scare the shit out of most.
How little we have control over.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Meaning making is so important because it does
Mhm.
help to ground us and it helps us
Absolutely.
to understand the world. But you are so right that is still kind of beyond comprehension in a lot of ways and beyond our control. Which
Mhm.
leads me to the next quote.
Yes.
They say mythology is what we knew back then. Science is what we know so far. Sooner or later, our creation stories are replaced by the narrative of science, painstaking science, and all gods and monsters outlive their original purpose and are reduced
Yeah.
to metaphor. True or false, Mark? What do you
100%
think?
true. That was the quote I thought you were going for
I
before.
had to build up to it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I'm trying
It was
to
great.
build
It was well
suspense. Yeah.
played. It was very well played. I think that's my favorite quote. I don't know. There's so many great quotes in this movie. The movie isn't something anyone needs to rush out and watch, but it is really. I would just say the writing is very, very well done in this. Even I think Idris Elba's Elba was incredible. I thought Tilda kind of wasn't her normal, crazy, interesting, engaging character. So anyway, the quote though, back to it, was incredible. And of course, yeah, sooner or later, mythology has to give way to science because that mythology is ignorance trying to be science. Ultimately, ignorance trying to be science. And so as we learn more and as we figure out what's really going on and recognize and understand that our stories were false, it lets us put them into the realm of metaphor. And there's still great value in them. So it doesn't change their value. It changes how they have value. So originally the value was this explains what's going on. And then once we learn the science and recognize that that isn't explaining what's going on, it gives us the opportunity to go back and see them as metaphor and gain yet another level of depth of what can we learn from this? What might be taught? What core real truths were the folks who told those stories holding on to create those stories? And I think there's great value in that. What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree with the quote, and I don't. So I think that in some ways that yes, obviously science explains things that mythology is trying to explain, and offers us real explanations of that. But I think also their purposes are different, and I think mythology is really trying to ultimately explain fundamental truths about life, and science is trying to explain facts about how the world works. So I think myths answer the question of why, and science answers the question of how. And so I think fundamentally maybe they're trying to answer different questions. Maybe in the ancient world there wasn't a difference. I think in the modern world there is.
Absolutely,
there is a difference,
and that's where I would go on it. In the ancient world, maybe there wasn't a difference because they thought they were answering the how. They did think that that's what they were doing, not based on a lot of facts as much as just creative imagination based on some truths. But I can hear exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think if modern Christians in particular could get our heads around a difference between truth and fact, a difference between how and why, we would lose the folks who want to continue to believe in a literal 7-day creation of the earth and all kinds of terrible theology like that. Okay, so Mark, one criticism of this movie has been actually the dynamic between the jinn and Alethea. And one reviewer said this: the idea of a black jinn and a white English woman in a battle of wits over narratives real and fictional are apt to strike a dissonant chord with some. What do you think about that dynamic, Mark?
That was problematic for me in that we have this white English woman who basically enslaves this black jinn by not finishing those questions or those wishes. Admittedly, he was somewhat involved with being okay with that, but that becomes really complicated. Was he like he had to be okay with it, because if he got really
Right.
mad about it, then she might not do it whatsoever. So that I found incredibly problematic. Now, ultimately, she does make the right choice with her final wish that he goes to the place he belongs, and that if possible, you know, would be with her when he can, kind of thing. She ultimately makes the right wish, but that doesn't really excuse that this is a trope in a lot of storytelling of a white woman entrapping a person who is other. I mean, that's the other part of this, is that it's a white woman ultimately having a relationship with a person that is described as somehow other. So that part of the storytelling, I felt like they kind of missed out on. From what I understand in the book that this is based on, that's not a real issue. The casting is what caused this issue. And I did find it somewhat problematic. What did you pick up on anything else?
Yeah, the other piece of that that bothered me some was, okay, she's this PhD narratologist who decides what is true about these stories,
Yeah.
and he is giving his real life experience of how he experienced these things, and yeah, and it is competing for meaning, and ultimately, it seems like it is her interpretation of the meaning that is given superiority, I think.
Absolutely.
And so,
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I found that troubling, and it felt odd from the very beginning. And as it went on, and she did actually enslave him,
Yeah.
it really felt awkward, and like we could have done a better job of navigating those.
It was the rest of it was
dynamics.
so well written and so clever.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they thought that by having him sort of be part of the decision, that she doesn't ask all three questions, and that he fought so hard, even as him being there was causing him great bodily harm. I think that they thought that made up for it somehow, but it really didn't, did it?
It really didn't. It really was problematic. So,
Yeah.
hey, there's a lot we could delve into with something this rich, but
Yes.
you know, it's time to go to our last segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment. We've got to leave ourselves time to do this. And Mark, did I steal any of your questions today?
You stole no questions. So
No
now I've got to figure out
questions.
which one. I've got to figure out which one to ask. I usually leave it to you. You steal all of them except for the one that I am left with. So.
None of them. Okay.
I
All
know.
right. Well, have some more of your cough syrup, and
Yes,
come back and go to the Make Me Look Stupid segment.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment, where we commits to trying to make our co-host look stupid. And as the host of this segment today, I am not going to give you first go.
Okay.
I don't want you to have any other chances to steal my question. And this is a question that I was really looking forward to asking you. I really wasn't sure if it might come up during the show. So it was kind of like my first question. I was like, I'm going to be ready because that one might not work because we may cover it. So here's my question. At the beginning of the movie, she says it is as true as any other concept of science in terms of the story she's telling, but that she has to tell us it as a fairy tale so that we can believe her.
Right.
From a narrative point of view, since she was a narratologist, do you think it all really happened? Or is it exactly a fairy tale like she made up in her coping skills as a kid?
I don't think it really happened. And I I actually think she kind of dreamt it all. I think it was all in her mind. So I think I think that the pieces where she interacted with other people, I think that really happened. But I don't think that.
So
I think so.
If the pieces where she interacted with other people really happened, how do you explain her going next door to the two women who and giving them treats, and the jinn showing up and them seeing her, if that was real?
Yeah, they didn't speak with him in any way. And so they kind of reacted to something, but we don't know what they reacted to necessarily. So I'm going to take the position that even though she said that she has a history of kind of seeing things, I think her interaction with the jinn was entirely in her head. I don't think no one else. I don't think anyone else ever saw him. I'm gonna take the position that
the kids in the park, at the very end kick the soccer ball, and he does that cool little jinn thing. He makes it bounce around in improbable ways, and they get the ball, and they're all impressed.
I think it's in her head. I think she thought all that up.
All right, I was honestly playing devil's advocate because I'm completely on board with you. Those are the two moments that kind of made me wonder. But look, here's the thing. And I think they intentionally give it away at the end. And besides all the stuff I talked about in the first segment, where there's so much in his stories that are reflections of her story, there's all of that. But when we go into her home, she has a collection of small vases with caps on them, much like there was in one of the stories. On her wall is a picture of Einstein, who we see in the very first meeting of the jinn. I think they drop so many hints of this is just stuff that her natural life has created in her head, whether it was a dream or whether it was her living into her job of doing narrative as a way of telling story and understanding self. I feel like that's what was definitely going on.
Good. I thought you were going to say the complete opposite. I thought you were going to say no.
That's why I wanted to play devil's advocate for just a few minutes. I wanted to see where you went with it, because those really were my two sticking points. Like the times that someone else saw the jinn, those were them. And I actually think that I disagree with you on that small point. I don't think those were real. I don't think those were real. I think both of those were just fanciful in her head. Like we sit around in the house and go, oh, you know what I ought to do? I ought to go give the neighbors next door some of this wonderful treat. I think it was just a fanciful that she ended up recording in what was ultimately the book that she wrote, that the story of the movie was supposedly her retelling. So your turn, sir. Make me look stupid.
Okay, so as you said, there are parallel pieces of Alethea's story and the jinn's story, and with the other women who are who interact with him. Do you think she sees herself as somehow connected to those other women, or do you think that she is in some way a reincarnation of those women?
I do think she sees herself in those women, because I think all of this is a actual fairy tale that she made up, and part of it is pulling out core parts of who she thinks she is, but might not be able to express in real life, and telling the story in a way that this amazing, wonderful jinn who has magical powers and is, greater than human, finds interest in. And I think part of it is her building up, trying to say these things that I hide away, these emotions, these longings that I have, are actually great attributes that I need to learn how to open up and to show a little more readily, because there is something engaging about them, and someone as special as the jinn could really see value in me. So yeah, I definitely think that in the realm of her storytelling, she definitely sees herself in each of them.
Yeah, I think she does as well. And I think not only does she see herself in each of them, but as she's imagining this story, she sees herself being each of these. And each of them kind of has a particular piece of her personality. And the scene that kind of drove it home for me is, remember when she's in the airplane on the way to the conference and she's reading furiously. and she's doing this weird reading
speed reading.
thing.
It's a speed reading technique.
Right, but and so she's and she's okay, and so
the third
is doing the same speed
in the third story
thing,
we see her, and she's wearing glasses with the glass holders that are very similar to hers. Like there's no doubt. I mean, you've got one who is trapped and feels trapped, and she definitely feels trapped in her own past and her lack of emotions. You got one who's highly intelligent and wants nothing more than to learn, and we see a picture of Einstein in her house. Clearly that's her. So yeah, I'm completely with you. There are some clear personality traits of herself that she pushes onto these characters, and I think part of that is having the Jinn fall in love with them and saying, these are good character traits that I sometimes hide away.
Well, I think, Mark, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, maybe I wouldn't have stood up and given this 6-minute standing ovation to the movie, but I think it's worth watching, and I think that it's valuable for people who think a lot about ancient stories and how we make meaning out of.
I completely agree, and I think it's valuable for people who really appreciate good storytelling. This is great storytelling. It's weird to come from the director of Fury Road with his high-end pacing and crazy, like, can I keep up? Can I understand what's going to have this very slow, methodical storytelling that at times is almost lethargically slow. I mean, it's weird. That part is difficult, but if you push through it, I think there's great value, like you said, in what's being told and understanding mythology and understanding how stories really do help us create meaning in our own lives.
George Miller is a bit of a chameleon, though. He also did Babe, Pig in the City.
Pig in the City, yeah.
So, it's hard to say much for certain about his movie-making style.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He doesn't really have a style. He was also one of the 4 folks in the Twilight movie. I mean, he jumps around genres and does all kinds of fun and interesting things.
Speaking of fun and interesting things, should we tell them what we're going to watch next week?
Oh, yeah. I'm so excited about this. We've been waiting literally all year long to get to this point. So coming out this Thursday is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and it's this gigantic tale. In the first Spider-Man, animated Spider-Man movie, we saw the multiverse and we saw several spider people. In this one, we're going to have an embarrassment of spider people as they try to protect the multiverse, and they end up pitting themselves against each other. I think it's going to be fantastic. The first one was brilliant as they switched back and forth between types of animation style and somehow did it seamlessly. It was incredible, great storytelling, great characters in it. I can't wait, man.
Me neither. I agree. It's an animated movie, but I think the first one was one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen. It's probably in my top 5 superhero.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Completely
agree. Yeah.
So I hope this one lives up. It's as good as the first one.
Absolutely.
I can't wait. It's released on Friday, right? So people will have enough time to go and see it. And we've also got an event coming up next month. The Wild Goose Festival.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this.
It is going to be exciting. We still at this point don't quite know when we'll be on or what stage we'll be at. It might be the Goose Cast stage, but we will let you know once we are told. But we do have a nice discount for you. So we'd love for you to come and join us in person because we're giving giveaways. We're doing our Shine Jesus Shine T-shirts. We'll probably have some Moonshine Jesus glass mugs that look like the old white lightning moonshine jugs. And so we hope that you'll come and join us. And when you register for your tickets, just use the discount code of Moonshine. And I think you'll get a discount that you can appreciate.
All right. I can't wait. And it's going to be fun to be in person.
Mark. For only the third time ever.
Only the third time we'll do this podcast in person, and it will be a lot of fun. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. I can't wait to see you next week, Mark.
Me too, sir. Can't wait to talk about the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are so thankful for those who have been watching live and also those who are downloading the podcast. Thank you so much for being loyal listeners. If it weren't for you, we couldn't be us. So thanks again. And don't forget, tune in next week to the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine